Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend and former failed potato magnate, Andrew Klavan, who came into punditry after the blight that wiped out the Irish, and he basically harvests livers from the third world children and has maintained. He knew Baron Rothschild personally.
Who am I?
Drew, your topic today comes from Yog Sothoth.
Sounds like an H.P. Lovecraft character.
It's got to be something goy backwards. Anyway, here's the question. Part of why the Millennial Generation is so afraid of facing the world is because of how badly your generation messed it up.
Hey, tough nuggets, snowflake.
Yeah.
It's like, you think that's just tough. The funny thing is, I'm actually half sympathetic to this. I always say that, like, one of the terrible things about the baby boomers is I wish they could die without taking me with them. It's like, I wish I could. See, this has been it's been a terrible generation. I mean, look, I think that there's things we can say. I'm not even sure the baby boomers get the credit for the best things that happened in white-black relationships. I'm not sure that doesn't also belong to the greatest generation before us. We thought that the greatest generation had messed up our lives beyond recall, and therefore we had to change everything and break everything. And that's why the kids in the 60s were on the streets, because, oh, look at you terrible people. You left us wars, you left us hate, you left us all this terrible stuff. You know, every generation leaves behind a mess. I mean, because the world is a mess. You know, this is one of the things that I think that, you know, earlier on we were talking about the film The Revenant and how strong our ancestors were. And I think that that's because they started out without any promises. I get this on the conservative side too. I talk to people who are going like, oh, you know, things are so bad, things are so, you know, who gave you a piece of paper when you came in that said you were going to live in the strongest, freest nation on earth and it was just going to stay that way and you didn't have to, you know, haul water to keep things going? You know, who told you that? You know, it's like it's a tough world. This country has had it so good for so long. And by the way, I think our generation really lucked out. I mean, we really lived through this peak moment.
Without question.
You know, yeah, I mean, we were in the freest, richest, most powerful country. And, you know, you want to say that our generation messed it up? Well, yeah, but, you know, it's now the ball is in the court of all these young kids who are sitting around hiding in their safe spaces and they can't hear, you know, a disagreeing opinion without falling apart and having a trigger warning and, you know, falling down. You know, look, what kind of world do you think they're going to leave? You know, I mean, if they can't take care of their own kids, if they can't get married, if they can't even reproduce, what the hell world are they going to leave? It's a tough place. And you know what? If we did things that were wrong, if my generation did things that were wrong, and by God, we sure did, you know, then deal with it, you know, deal with it. Do it better. Do it better. It's like, you know, I don't know what to say. Like, I've been here fighting, you know, most of my life, trying to do what's right, trying to say what's right. It's cost me a lot of dough. It's cost me a lot of friends, you know. That's all anybody can do. And so I would say, you know, it's very dispiriting when I look at the history of a generation that poured out into the streets and tried to make draft dodging heroic and tried to make not taking care of your children, you know, heroic and feminist and all this stuff, and tried to take, you know, say that you couldn't have free speech, and that capitalism, this system that had lifted all these people out of poverty, that was somehow a horrible thing, that we were too delicate to be capitalists. I look at that, and yes, do I feel some disdain for my own generation? I surely do. But I look at the young kids and I just think, like, you know, so what? So you're afraid, you know? Who's told you weren't going to be afraid? You know, take up the mantle, take up the torch. The torch, listen, the torch falls to individuals. It doesn't fall to generations. It falls to individuals. And that's, now it's in their hands, you know, and they're going to have to pick it up. We picked it up, you know, we did our little best, you know, we did what we could, you know, now you pick it up. It's like, there's no guarantees. You know, this is the thing, it drives me crazy that we have this conversation. This is the world. This is what it's like. There are wars, there's hate, there's bigotry, there's all this stuff, you know. Get used to it, you know, do the right thing, you know, man up and woman up and do the right thing. You know, that's all any of us can do.
It seems to me that this millennial generation is it's not like that's a choice they're going to make. I think they just simply do not have the resources to man up or woman up.
Right now they don't seem to.
They do not. Now, we're generalizing, of course, because they're the toughest soldiers in the world out there right now are millennials.
That's right.
But we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the microaggression crowd. Here's a little interesting little aside. I saw just this morning, before I came into work, I saw this little piece of video. There's apparently in Oregon, in a little town in Oregon, in the middle of the night, there is this weird mechanical shrieking sound that comes out of nowhere. No one can place it. It's really loud. It's on video, and it's like coming from nowhere, and they don't know where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It'll make the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Yeah.
And you know what my realization was? Because it freaked me out. You can't tell where it's coming from. It's like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And I realized, that reaction is the sound of having a predator out there. That's what it feels like to have predators out there. That kind of, what the hell is that? We haven't had predators in hundreds of years, and we haven't had serious enemies in a generation or two. And that kind of holy crap, there's something out there, and I don't know what it is, and it's, we've called 911 and they don't know what it is. It made me realize that this is the problem, is that when you have no threats, and when there's nothing but abundance, it's, as we've said before, it's asymptotic. Where do you go if you're born into a world of Xbox 360s and 24-hour entertainment? You've never been hungry, ever. Never been cold, never been in pain, ever. Where do you go from there? This generation, this millennial generation, I think is a victim of child abuse. And the pendulum swing is pretty obvious to me. The greatest generation, we talk about all they suffered in World War II. My dad was one of those people who went to World War II. But we keep forgetting what the Depression did for them as young kids. My dad saw his neighbors eating out of garbage cans. It's the only time I ever saw my dad cry, by the way, talking about watching his neighbors eat out of garbage cans during the Depression. So that toughened them up. They go over to World War II. They save the world for freedom. And when they come back, having watched their buddy turn into pink mist, right? They don't want yelling. They don't want screaming. They don't want noise. They don't want any kind of sudden movements. They want to sit in their lazy boys. They want to listen to Perry Como, and they want to relax. And they earned it. But because of the trauma that they suffered as a generation, it made them very remote and very removed. And they wouldn't talk to their wives, and that caused our moms to be very kind of, unsure of themselves and unloved and so on. And so I think the pattern, I'm certainly not unique in this, is that the greatest generation came home and were actually great soldiers, but not such great parents, very neglectful of their kids emotionally, very, very, enclosed. And then our generation, the boomers, went so far in the other direction to correct that they could not possibly be parents, right? They had to be the kid's friend, which means you could never, ever, ever yell at them, and they could always had to come in first, and every painting they ever did had to go on the refrigerator, and everything they ever did was wonderful. I'll tell you something, Drew. Whenever there's a one-to-one correlation, I've never seen it broken. Whenever I see a kid having a temper tantrum, I mean a meltdown, and the father is there, the father never says son, and the father never calls him by the name. He always says, buddy. What's the matter, buddy? Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. Come on, pal. Come on, buddy. Come on, pal. Get up off the floor. That's not what parenting is. You're not the buddy and the pal. It's like, you get up now, or you are going to have something to cry about.
One of the things that you mentioned early on that I think is really important is that a generation is defined by a very small number of leaders. When in the 60s, our generation, or the generation really just before us, but in the 60s, that generation was defined by all these people who were at Woodstock. They were dropping out, they were taking drugs, they were naked in the streets, they were having sex, all this stuff. That same generation became the Reagan generation of entrepreneurs and stockholders who totally built a new economy for a new generation, an economy that lasted for a quarter of a century and as a profitable enterprise. So it really is a lot about leaders and who comes to the fore and who takes the foreground and leads the generation on. So the fact that there are these people, these great soldiers, these special ops guys, these guys who went over and fought in Iraq and actually won that war before Obama lost it, those are part of this new millennial generation too. And if, and right now it doesn't look like this is going to happen, but if a leader should rise up who brings those people to the fore and shows those people the way, I think this generation is still capable of great things. These little whiny people, they're just, the whiny safe space, Black Lives Matter people who are blaming other people for their misfortune. Those people are a small minority, and just like the SEAL Team 6 guys are a small minority, and it really is going to be a question of which minority rises to the fore, and it's still an open question.
That's a good question. They do get all the attention, and that whole thing is really interesting. You've got to you do have to make allowances for the fact that these are the people that are getting the most attention. But ultimately, I think these kids have, that younger millennials are tired of the whining and the complaining of their older brothers and sisters. And I think they've had enough of it. And there's a gigantic conservative rebellion against this progressive crybabyism among 15, 16, 14-year-olds. That's certainly my hope anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for today, but you can always let us know what questions you'd like answered in the little comment section located below. For Andrew Klavan and PJ TV, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for watching.